I started Blindster in 2010 in my garage after I overpaid for new blinds. I researched the industry, hired my mom, and 14 years later, we're one of the largest retailers of custom blinds in the U.S. Don't pay too much for new blinds. Go to Blindster.com.
Is this the tiger?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams should send a thank you card to Magic Johnson's NFL team, the Washington Commanders. Magic is in his second season as a part owner of the Washington franchise. The Commanders beat Atlanta in overtime Sunday night, a win that clinched the NFC West title for the 10-6 Rams. The Rams are division champs based on their win total and strength of victories tiebreaker. They will host a wildcard game at SoFi. At the moment, the Rams are the number 3 seed in the NFC playoffs. They wrap up the regular season at home next Sunday against Seattle. The Chargers are in the playoffs. They clinched a wildcard spot in the AFC with Saturday's win at New England. The Lakers traded D'Angelo Russell to Brooklyn for forward Dorian Finney-Smith and shooting guard Shake Milton. This is the 5th time Russell has been traded in the past 7.5 years. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Somebody bring out the confetti, baby! Starting Monday, January 6th, KBLA Talk 1580 has a new midday lineup.
I'm excited.
Are you ready for Tavis Smiley, Dr. Cornell West, Jesse Jackson Jr., D.L. Hughley, and E. Quarterly Corte back-to-back?
Oh, my God.
Are you really ready for all this smoke?
I'm ready, brother.
Yes, we still have Dominique DiPrima in the mornings and Zoe Williams in the evenings, but middays just got lit on KBLA Talk 1580.
We on fire.
All across America, people are talking about our new midday lineup. Starting Monday, January 6th, our KBLA 1580 app downloads are on fire because everybody's going to be tuning in.
Yes, I love you guys. You are the bomb.
Now would be a good time to hit up SMB at KBLA1580.com if you want folks to hear about your business or brand. That's SMB at KBLA1580.com. It's going up in 2025 on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's going up.
That's what I want.
Heaven help the child who never had a home. Heaven help the girl who walks the streets alone. Heaven help the roses if the bombs begin to fall. Heaven help us all. Heaven help the black man if he struggles one more day. Heaven help the white man if he turns back away. Heaven help the man who kicks the man who has to crawl. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us all.
KBLA Talk 1580. It's time to talk legacies, presidential legacies, and the impact of the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, joining me in this conversation. Former president of the Guild Law School, the publisher and co-founder of the LA Progressive. She was actually literally a member of several space flight teams at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory before she got into this law and journalism path. She sits on several boards, including the board of directors for the ACLU. And, of course, she is the publisher and editor of the LA Progressive. Sharon Kyle, good morning.
Good morning, Dominique. How are you? Good to hear your voice.
Yes, happy holidays to you. Thank you for joining me this morning. Certainly, you've covered many a president, and you have a great way of putting things in context for us through your journalistic and legal lens. And, you know, Jimmy Carter was 100, so I don't think this is a shock. He made it to 100. He lived longer than any president, former president of the United States. But I do think that it is interesting timing right before the 47th president takes office for us to be reflecting on Jimmy Carter, who seems to be part of a a breed that is long gone. I can't imagine a Jimmy Carter becoming president today. Can you?
Absolutely. I see. When I heard that he passed away, I was in a text conversation with a girlfriend that I met in 1972, just to give you a sense of how long we've been friends. She lives on the East Coast. And we characterize this as the passing of an era. And I think, his death does represent a major change in politics, what we as a nation expect from the people that we choose to sit in that seat. It's a change, but then there are also some things that still haven't changed. So when you invited me to come and speak today, I did a little bit of research, as you know I always do, because I love that. I love research, and I love reading and learning new things. And first of all, Jimmy Carter was the first president that I voted for. So I'm giving my age away here. But because of the 26th Amendment, I wasn't 21 when I voted for Jimmy Carter. I was 18, and I was so excited that I had this authority to make a decision about who was going to sit in the highest office of the land. And I was all proud, and I went down there and I voted. And I never regretted that decision. There was so much that I didn't understand about politics back then that I've learned over the years. And obviously, I've lived through many presidents. In fact, my earliest memory as a child, was the assassination of President Kennedy. So, and I was, barely a baby, but I remember it because Caroline and John were in my age group, and I remember seeing them on TV at a funeral, and that was like my first experience of, well, what is that? What's a funeral? Why? So anyway, I just say that to say that I have been around since Kennedy, and I have watched the aura of the president change. But Jimmy Carter was one who maintained his dignity, and many have said, and I don't disagree, that he actually did more in serving the people after he left office, after he left the office of the presidency. But if we talk about what he did as a president, one of the things he did on day 2 of his presidency was he pardoned all Vietnam War draft evaders. And for those people who are listening who are not of the age where, of the Vietnam War, a lot of people may know this. My husband, Dick Price, is a Vietnam War veteran, and he was out there on the battlefield. His generation, and I'm not the Vietnam War generation age, but they're just ahead of me. He's 10 years older than me. The Vietnam War was a huge threat. It was a devastating experience and changed the way that wars are put out there and through the media. Changed that because the people didn't want to see all these caskets coming in. So he did this thing of pardoning the Vietnam War drafters on day 2. Can you imagine Trump? He's already listed what he's going to do.
Well, he's pardoning the January 6th attackers. It's kind of the opposite side of that coin.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, how was that move received at that time? Because I know the Vietnam War was, very controversial war, but the sort of military-industrial complex and the mainstream media, in my understanding of it, very much continued to glorify that war, or tried to.
Yes and no, but I mean, in reality, because now I'm there, and I remember. Vietnam was an unpopular war. And in fact, the 26th Amendment to the Constitution that reduced the voting age from 21 to 18, the one that I benefited from, we would never have had that but for Vietnam. Because the argument was that we had these young men going and losing their lives, and they didn't even have the right to vote. So that was one of the strengths of the argument to pass the 26th Amendment to reduce the voting age. And Jimmy Carter was the second president to benefit from that reduction from age 21 to 18, which gave him 12 million more people that could vote for him.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say he benefited from a number of different things, right? The demise of Nixon. But this is a guy who, somebody in the chat says, was a peanut farmer. I think it was a little bit more complex than that. I think his family had agricultural holdings. He was known as a peanut farmer. He wasn't a poor man, but he wasn't a billionaire, an oligarch by today's standards, right?
Absolutely not. In fact, from what I was reading, that peanut farm that he took over was actually failing. And so he came back from college and he helped his family to bring the peanut farm back to life. But he wasn't just president. I mean, he was the governor of Georgia.
Right.
And he did have a long political career. In fact, he did a lot of good stuff. He introduced and established the United States Department of Energy, the Department of Education. He worked on the Camp David Accords, bringing Egypt and Israel together, and the Panama Canal Treaty, and did a second round of talks with the SALT talks, the Strategic Arms Limitation talks. So this is obviously before the USSR, which was the Soviet Union, before it dismantled. It was a serious threat because of the amount of arms. They were building up arms, and we had to come together and talk about how to limit those arms, because if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
And so the United States and the USSR, the Soviet Union, had to do something to limit what they were doing. And Carter was very successful at bargaining deals that led toward peaceful solutions. So, like I said, I had no regrets about voting for him, but he was a human being and he was imperfect. And so now I want to go and start talking about some other stuff.
Yeah. We'll do that when we come forward. It's funny because I was talking with another person that I know who was too young to vote when Carter was elected, but old enough to be concerned, and was urging his parents not to vote for Carter, and they did anyway. So it's interesting the reflections people have. I just remember my mom talking, because she was politically active, and as a little kid, her talking about Nixon, and that was my first introduction to presidential politics, was her telling me how terrible Nixon was, and then he ended up having to resign. So I was like, hey, my mom's pretty smart. But the whole Carter era, I think it's informative for today, and I can't wait to hear the critiques that you bring forward when we continue this conversation. Sharon Kyle of the LA Progressive, Dominique DiPrima, and we are on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now.
800-550-9651.
Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS.
Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start.
Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems.
We have over 1,000 5-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau.
You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com
or call 800-550-9651. That's 800-550-9651.
Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline Nasal Spray?
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Here they come, y'all, here they come. Here they come, y'all, here they come.
Get out the way. Move.
First things first with Dominique DiPrima at 6 a.m. Tavis Smiley at 9 a.m. Truth Time with Dr. Cornell West and Nina Turner at 12 noon. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Here they come, y'all, here they come.
Get out the way. Get out the way. Get out the way.
The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show at 1 p.m. The D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show at 2 p.m. A More Perfect Union with Dr. Nee Quarterly Forte at 4 p.m. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Here they come, y'all. Here they come.
Get out the way. Get out the way. Get out the way.
Tune in weekdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the talk of the town. Only on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. Here they come, y'all. Here they come.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
And I should mention that flags will fly at half staff for 30 days from Sunday in honor of the 39th president, President Jimmy Carter, who died at the age of 100. His state funeral in Washington will take place on January 9th. The sitting president, Joe Biden, has declared January 9th as a national day of mourning all across the United States. And he was honored over the weekend with a moment of silence before the Atlanta Falcons game. This is just, hours after he passed away. And certainly, he's a Nobel laureate, peace laureate. Many accomplishments, as you said, during his presidency, but also after the presidency, bringing that peace between Israel and Egypt, which we kind of take it for granted because it held for a long time, but that was not a done deal, and he did manage to accomplish that. And it's ironic that Trump is talking about taking back the Panama Canal, something I don't think he can do without having an actual conflict there in Central America. But Jimmy Carter was the one who engineered the return of the Panama Canal to Panama, which was seen as, in Latin America, a huge symbol of the colonizer, i.e. the United States, exploiting Central America. And now, Sharon Kyle, you had some things you wanted to say to balance out all of the laudatory assessments that are being given now, on the occasion of his passing.
Yes. But I still revered him as a human being. I thought he accomplished a lot, especially after his presidency, the work that he did with Habitat for Humanity. But then I found out one thing that I had no knowledge of at all. Just in preparing to talk to you today, I learned that Jimmy Carter is related to Motown founder Berry Gordy.
That I did not know.
Right?
That's
right?
bizarre.
I didn't know that either.
So you're saying he's black, or that Berry Gordy's not?
Okay.
I should know better, of all people.
Right. So you know which way it probably went. I think most black people knows how this happened. So Motown founder Berry Gordy by way of their white great-grandfather, James Thomas Gordy, fathered a child with a black woman that he enslaved. And so James Thomas Gordy is the great-grandfather also of Jimmy Carter.
That is wild.
Right. So it's not like a distant relationship.
Yeah. Honey Brown 24 says they're second cousins. Never knew that.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's some kind of something in them genes.
Oh, yeah. Well, the some kind of something is in Berry Gordy's genes.
Right.
So Jimmy Carter, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have any African ancestry, but his great-grandfather did father a black child with a woman that he enslaved. And so Jimmy Carter is from Georgia, and his parents, his family had this peanut farm. And there are stories that are told of him, being opposed to segregation, that he had loving relationships warm relationships with the black people who worked on the peanut plantation. And, I always kind of take that with a grain of salt. But he did demonstrate throughout his life that he really was, it was the core fiber of his being was to be a uniter and not a divider, that he was a person who lived by a moral code. He came out and spoke on behalf of the Palestinians. He did things that other presidents wouldn't do, including finally speaking against segregation. But here's my thing about Jimmy Carter. He was raised during American apartheid in Georgia, where segregation was enforced by the state. But it wasn't until he was 46 years old and running for a political office, so early in his political career, his apparent ambivalence towards segregation was beginning to have an impact on his ability to win office.
So you feel like he only pivoted away from segregation and racism because of his political ambitions?
Because he had a way to benefit. He was taking a hit. There was a growing desire to get rid of segregation. In 1966, there was a groundswell of segregationists that put Lester Maddox, who was a little bit older, but was running as a politician at the same time that Jimmy Carter was running. In fact, when Jimmy Carter became the governor of Georgia, Lester Maddox was his deputy. But Lester Maddox was a staunch segregationist. And Carter was running against him and lost. Carter did not take a stand toward desegregation during that period because he didn't feel that it would give him an advantage. He was not outspoken about what his feelings were. So in other words, he was willing to throw black people under the bus because politically it would give him a leg up.
So it sounds like you're saying, because what we're hearing the most of all about Jimmy Carter right now is this is a president with a moral compass, particularly as compared with our more recent presidents. Someone was in the chat, I can't see the name, talking about this is one of the few presidents that didn't have a mistress. He's credited for living a humble life after the presidency. He chose not to sit on any corporate boards. He said he didn't fault others for doing it, but he didn't want to profit off of the presidency in that way. Instead, he wrote about 33 books, which means he must have been pretty smart. I've been taking 100 years to try to write one. And that actually most of his money post-presidency came from his writing career. But it sounds like you're saying he did have that ruthless politician streak of saying, you know what, I'm going to throw this entire race of people under the bus for political advantage.
I think that was a part of who Jimmy Carter was. That was the environment from which he sprung from. He had his family owned a plantation in Georgia.
Plains,
his
Georgia.
great-grandfather enslaved people.
Yeah. You don't have to go too
That's
far
where
back in the family tree. Right. You don't have to go back too far in the family tree.
Yeah. So, I just kind of thought it was interesting that we, like you say, right now we're looking back and we're sort of celebrating his wonderful life. But I do remember thinking that, wait a minute, this guy is from Georgia, owned a plantation, probably had enslavement somewhere in his past. If he has such a strong moral compass, how come we never really heard about him in the 60s taking a stand, when he became an adult, not as a child? Okay, I don't fault anyone from, being raised the way they were raised, but why didn't we hear about him being an adult and making a stand during one of the most pivotal times in the civil rights era? That's when his comeuppance was coming in the 1960s. And it wasn't happening because he wasn't doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it certainly adds a level of drama to the fact that he was saying he wanted to live long enough to vote for Kamala Harris. I mean, that was one of the reasons why he said he wanted to live to 100 so he could cast his ballot for Kamala Harris, which he did.
Yes, I know. And that was great. And I think that, now there's no way for me to know this, but just judging by the way he lived his life, I suspect that he regrets the decisions he made in his early political career, not to take a strong stand. He eventually did take a stand against segregationists, but people were surprised of the position that he had taken because he had not voiced those objections before.
Yeah, that's deep. And he goes on to, he goes on to be considered a president who was liberal at the time. In today's world, they would be calling him a communist. Even though clearly he wasn't.
Right.
But I never thought about that in terms of the segregationist past, and certainly if he's 100, so that means he was born in 1924, so he would have been a grown adult during some of the most terrifying episodes of racial violence in this country's history.
That's right. And so it's hard to imagine that because I haven't lived through that and you haven't lived through that, but I am close enough to it. My grandmother, who died in 2009, I was her first grandchild, and she died in 2009. She was born in 1909 in the South.
Wow.
So, and because we were close, and she moved to California, and I saw her a lot, there were stories that I was told and that the family was told. So I learned firsthand about some of those terrible things, but not even the worst stuff. I learned worse things after she died. But yeah, he had to witness and also benefit from the apartheid system in the United States.
So interesting. Of course, he, we'll talk about this after News, Traffic, and Sports, wrote a book, first to label the Israeli system in Gaza apartheid, and took a lot of heat for that. Speaking of standing up and speaking out. We'll look at that and more when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. Former President Jimmy Carter has passed away at 100 in Plains, Georgia. He was the longest-lived former president. Carter, the 39th president, served from 1977 to 1981. His wife Rosalind died in November 2023. Public observances for former President Carter are planned for Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, Georgia, followed by a private interment in Plains, Georgia. Plans for public events and a state funeral are pending. Condolences can be left at jimmycartertribute.org. Severe storms in the South over the weekend caused at least 4 deaths and over 30 tornadoes in 6 states. Fatalities were reported in Mississippi, North Carolina, and Texas. And Sonic the Hedgehog 3 leads the box office. Mufasa the Lion King is second and will soon cross $100 million. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. I started Blindster in 2010 in my garage after I overpaid for new blinds. I researched the industry, hired my mom, and 14 years later, we're one of the largest retailers of custom blinds in the U.S. Don't pay too much for new blinds. Go to Blindster.com.
Is this the takeover? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams should send a thank you card to Magic Johnson's NFL team, the Washington Commanders. Magic is in his second season as a part owner of the Washington franchise. The Commanders beat Atlanta in overtime Sunday night, a win that clinched the NFC West title for the 10-6 Rams. The Rams are division champs based on their win total and strength of victories tiebreaker. They will host a wildcard game at SoFi. At the moment, the Rams are the number 3 seed in the NFC playoffs. They wrap up the regular season at home next Sunday against Seattle. The Chargers are in the playoffs. They clinched a wildcard spot in the AFC with Saturday's win at New England. The Lakers traded D'Angelo Russell to Brooklyn for forward Dorian Finney-Smith and shooting guard Shake Milton. This is the 5th time Russell has been traded in the past 7.5 years. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Texting enrolls you into recurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply.
Hey, Dan, how you doing? Haven't seen you around the gym for a while.
Yeah, I've really fallen off. Since I turned 40, I just don't get the results I used to get.
Could be lower testosterone.
Lower T?
Yeah, I went through it a while back. Once you hit 40, your body has less free testosterone. I got Nugenix Total T, and it's made a huge difference for me.
I've seen that ad on TV. Is it for real?
Oh, yeah. The key ingredient is something called Tesnor, which helps boost free and total testosterone levels to help you trim up and stay lean.
And it's made a difference for you?
Man, I feel like I'm in my 20s again, at work, in the gym, and in the bedroom.
Are they still giving out complimentary bottles for people to try it for themselves?
Yeah, you just need to send them a text.
Text PREP to 42424 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T, the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. Text PREP to 42424. That's PREP to 42424.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Talking with Sharon Kyle. She is the publisher and editor of the LA Progressive. LAProgressive.com is where you can sign up. It's daily for you news junkies, those among us like me and Paul Lee who love to read. Definitely want to go to LAProgressive.com and sign up to be a subscriber. I love, love, love your publication. I have someone DMing me talking about they don't agree with you, that they believe that Jimmy Carter was the greatest president, one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. I think that some of those things we can look at in the context of the times, how unheard of would it have been for a president to step forward. But certainly we would have hoped that someone that we revere for his moral compass, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, would have spoken out against segregation and racism. Pivoting here to this guinea worm scenario, the Carter Center, which is more than, it's not a presidential library, it's a whole nonprofit organization helping to do the work Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, his beloved wife. There's a disease called Dracunculus medinensis, which is also known as guinea worm. which has been almost eradicated worldwide. And this is largely due to the work of Jimmy Carter after he left office and the Carter Center. And they're larvae that live in the water. They get inside of people when people drink water that has those larvae, or if they eat fish that have the larvae, they live in their stomach. This whole huge worm grows, and it pops out their skin. It's really, really disabling, painful, and there's no known cure or vaccine. So what they've had to do is educate people to stay out of the water so they don't add the larva into more drinking water supplies, educating people about how to filter their water, providing filters, and now it's educating people about how to keep their pets from passing on this guinea worm, and it's close to being eradicated. They have done it's something like 99%, I believe, that has been eliminated of this particular tropical disease, which was very, very impactful in Africa. They said there were 3.6 million cases, according to BBC, in 1986, and now there were just 11 cases in 2024. That's pretty amazing. So I guess when we talk presidential legacies, that kind of an impact where you can literally claim to have saved millions of lives, it's kind of a best case scenario, right?
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't sure if you were waiting for me to jump in.
Yes, yes.
So yes, and I'm going to emphasize this again. I have no regrets that Jimmy Carter was the first president that I voted for. I'm proud to say that. I think that he was a wonderful human being who was flawed like every other human being, including myself and every other human being I've ever met. I bring up the issue of American apartheid because it is so normal, it is so common, and was so normal and common for him that even a person who would take a stand against the treatment of the Palestinians at a time when it was so unpopular for him to write that book, even a person with that kind of moral fortitude would not say anything, even though he was much younger, but he was still in his 40s, because of the commonness of it.
Yeah.
So when we started this conversation, Dominique, you talked about how the great uniter, I would call him the great uniter, President Carter, how different and how it seems ironic, that he would pass away while we have number 47 waiting in the wings till January the 20th, when he becomes the acting president again, the 47th president of the United States. And I think it's not unfair to call him the great divider.
Yeah.
But we've been there before. So it's not like this. We haven't had people who lacked a moral compass to sit in that seat. In fact, in the early years of this country, and one could argue for half of the history of this country, we have had people in that seat who lacked a moral compass. So I happened to be listening to Karen Hunter's show the other day, and she was talking about Chris Rock's monologue that he gave for Saturday Night Live after learning that Donald Trump had won. And he's very funny. And he was talking about how people are so upset that Trump doesn't carry himself with dignity. He lacks what it takes to be a president. But he says he reminds the audience that Trump's vileness is nothing new. He says, we've had presidents move into the White House and campaign all before winning that have pregnant slaves. And, people laughed. And I mean, it's a long time ago. Okay, maybe we could laugh about that. But he also dropped a line in his monologue that said, a number of those races are in my wallet right now. And, I thought about what he said. And then I pulled up the information on, so we have 6 denominations of currency, United States currency. We have a $1 bill. We have an official $2 bill, even though most people don't use it. We have a $5 bill, $10 bill, a $20 bill, $50 bill, and a $100 bill. Now, not all of them have images of presidents on them. Benjamin Franklin is on the 100. Alexander Hamilton is on the 10. But I took a rundown of each of them. The $1 bill, George Washington, the person that we hold up almost as if he were a god. He and Thomas Jefferson, the second person, Thomas Jefferson's face is on the $2 bill, had about 600 people that they were holding against their will. We know that Thomas Jefferson fathered children with at least one of those people that he enslaved. And we know that he didn't think that it was okay because I would say within the last 5 years or so, archaeologists found in Monticello a tunnel leading directly from Thomas Jefferson's bedroom to another room that had been turned into a public restroom when Monticello was used just sort of as a museum. But when they restored the house to the way it was when Thomas Jefferson used it, they found this tunnel and this room that many historians claim was the room where Sally Hemings lived for her entire life.
Put that in your presidential legacies and smoke it. Let's go to Eric, calling us from Carson. Eric, you're on with Sharon Kyle of the LA Progressive and me. Good morning.
Good morning, Dominique. How are you doing?
Good, good. What's on your mind?
Before I make my comment, I want to just say rest in peace to the lovely Robin Ayers, and I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to be present at her homegoing service.
Yes.
With that being said, Jimmy Carter was the 39th president, and he, excuse my morning voice, he did not get reelected for a second term, and he became larger than in life as a president after his term of president than while he was president. He was a humanitarian. And so it reminds me of Tupac, who, as famous as I was a child when Jimmy Carter was the president.
Right.
But I wasn't a child when Tupac, was alive as a rapper, and he, no comparison, no disrespect, but he became larger in death than he was in life. As large as many celebrities were in life, they became larger in death. And so Jimmy Carter was larger after his presidency than during. And so I couldn't get on the last time you were on the radio, but I want to say reparations is what we keep talking about. And I've just been hearing about this over the last 5 years or so. But this is my question, is that just a bunch of rhetoric? It sounds good talk, makes for a good movie, but are we really thinking that we're going to get reparations? I mean, seriously? And that's my question.
Okay. Well, it's already starting, Eric. Evanston has paid out actual cash. The Bruce family got their land back. I can't predict exactly when and where and how, but it's already happening. It's starting. Sharon Kyle, you want to weigh in on Eric's question?
Yeah, I think that the country is yes, there are isolated incidents and there are little pockets of activity, but I think the country as a whole is not ready to do that. They're ready to provide reparations to others. Many people don't know that President Abraham Lincoln actually endorsed a piece of legislation that provided reparations to former enslavers. After the Emancipation Proclamation, they supposedly lost their fortunes, and so they were compensated. A small number, I think it was just those that were living in Washington D.C. They were compensated. So and that the Japanese were who suffered from being in the internment camps. They received some form of reparations, as did many people, Alaskan Inuits. I have a long list.
I mean, the Jewish Americans, even though
it goes on and on.
And it's a really, really long list. There's a very interesting report out of Harvard stating that the U.S. already has the mechanisms to pay reparations because they've done it so many times before. The question is a question of will. I think that's right, Sharon.
Yeah. So I think that, so we know that they can, and we know that they are not opposed to the concept of reparations, but there is something special about providing reparations to the descendants of the enslaved. Now, I was just talking about the denominations, the money. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Alexander Hamilton, Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, and Benjamin Franklin. Those are the seven people whose images, it's six. No, it's seven. Those images are on our currency right now. Currently, they are on our currency. Now, why am I emphasizing that? Because it's another thing that I learned on the last couple of days. Every single one of them were involved in the slave trade, including Abraham Lincoln. There is a book written by Kevin Orland Johnson. He's the author of The Lincolns in the White House, Slanders, Scandals, and Lincoln Slave Trading Revealed. And I don't have the book, haven't read it yet, but he made one statement that made me say, Mary Todd was the daughter of one of the largest enslavers in the state of Kentucky. And then I started to look at, where did Mary and Abraham live when he was just a young attorney? Boy, did they have a nice, big, fabulous house in Illinois. So I will say that and bring up, why am I talking about the currency? Because there is this normalization and this deification of people who have done scandalous things, but we don't think they're scandalous when they're done against Black people. And I think, I often think of the child, Tamir Rice, who at 12 years old, I'm sure everybody that's listening knows about Tamir Rice, 12 years old, gunned down by police in Ohio. He was outside doing what a lot of 12-year-old boys do, playing with a toy gun, a pellet gun. The police didn't even stop to ask him any questions. They pulled up and just killed him. And then I think about the 11-year-old J.C. Lee Dugard, an 11-year-old little girl who was kidnapped but while she was waiting for her school bus. She's a white little girl. The man who kidnapped her, Philip Garrido, kept her locked up in a shed. This 11-year-old girl served as his sexual plaything. He sexually molested her. He abused her for 18 years. She was held against her will. And when she was finally found and released, I think the entire country took a sigh of relief. Diane Sawyer of, I think it was ABC, she did a long expose. And I remember watching that expose, and I was crying, thinking about this little 11-year-old girl in this shed, having to give birth by herself. She gave birth to 2 children. And the empathy that I had for her, maybe it was partly because J.C. Lee Dugard was the same age as my daughter, and I just can't imagine that happening actually to any little girl. But the lack of empathy, and Martin Luther King talks about that, the lack of empathy for Black people is one of the things that keeps us in this situation. And we normalize and deify people who have done horrendous things. We act as if when someone has done something great, you can never say anything about the other things that they have done that aren't great, and in some cases that are outright monstrous.
Yep. We're talking with Sharon Kyle. She's a publisher of the LA Progressive. We're talking presidential legacies and, of course, the life and death of Jimmy Carter. More straight ahead on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
That was another way. I would smoke once an hour. That didn't work either. All that would happen at some point of the day, I would end up doubling up. Other ways that I tried to quit was I stopped buying cigarettes totally. But if I took 3 puffs off of 15 friends, those didn't count because they weren't my cigarettes and they weren't full cigarettes. I went through a lot.
Every attempt is part of your story to quit for good. Visit Kick It California today at kickitca.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their program. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties: classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
On First Things First, before we run out of time, Sharon Kyle, let's definitely let people know how to track you.
Oh, okay. So I'm Sharon Kyle. You can find me on the laprogressive.com. We publish at least 5 articles a day on issues of social consequence, social justice, and politics. And my husband, Dick Price, and I have been doing this since March of 2008.
Wow.
So we do it daily.
Yeah, you guys do great work. So we didn't dive too deep into it, but I think my impression of the mainstream media coverage of the death of the 39th President Jimmy Carter is there's been very little conversation actually about his book, Peace Not Apartheid, about him calling out Israel in a way that made him a quote-unquote controversial figure, even as an elder statesman. And this was, I think, 2006, if I'm not mistaken. So long before the robust conversations that we're having now about what's happening in Gaza. And I think,
absolutely,
that was pretty. I was floored when I first saw that.
Yeah, well, actually, it was that book. I bought it when it came out and read it, and it really opened my eyes to what's happening in Palestine, so many years ago, and what's happening now is genocide. It's been called out, by every major organization, international courts, and so on. Israel is committing genocide against the people, the Palestinians, and they're doing it by way of American arms. So our hands are definitely not clean in this.
I mean, 2 days ago, Israel just attacked like the last remaining hospital and arrested the people that were working there. And so I just put it in context, when you talk about presidential legacies, I think there are few that have made such a bold statement at any time during or after their presidencies.
I agree. Absolutely. I think that Jimmy Carter deserves all of the honor and the recognition that he will receive today and in the coming weeks. He absolutely deserves it, particularly both for the time that he served as president and for the work, the humanitarian work that he did after he left office. But again, we have to remember that it's up to us, the people, to hold our leaders' feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And not deify them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny too because I never knew that he didn't want them to play Hail to the Chief whenever he walked in, and that he was criticized for that. Like, people wanted the pomp and circumstances of the presidency. They felt he was downgrading it by keeping it simple. And, I think that's also important, especially when we're moving into the era of Trump 2. Who's all about flattery, pomp, circumstance, golden toilets, and supermodel wives, and how, that to me is they become symbols. Even though Carter was a wealthy man, it becomes symbols of a class war, which is really what it feels like we're moving into in this country.
Yeah, it gets to the point where wealth is associated with leadership, like Elon Musk now taking on more and more of a role, so much, in fact, that people are actually calling him President Musk. Nobody elected him, but just the fact that he's the richest man in the world, in many people's eyes, that gives him license.
Right, and plus the fact that he always calls himself a genius without proof. Black people don't get to do that. Sharon Kyle, thank you so much for being with us today. It was as fascinating, as always, to hear your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
And you as well. Tavis has got his favorite interview that he did with Jimmy Carter, because leave it to Tavis to have that for you. He's got a great show on deck for you. I'm going to go with a Jimmy Carter quote to wrap things up today. He says, "We must adjust to changing times and still hold to unchanging principles." This is actually something he attributed to a teacher, but he said it during his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. I'm Dominique DiPrima. I'll see you on social media. Yeah, I'll be back up there at DiPrima Radio and KBLA 1580 on all platforms. Like my mama used to say, history's now, and we are making it together. Until next time, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.